In the vast frozen expanse of the Soviet Union's geographic spine, where the divide between Europe and Asia is marked not by political borders, but by the rugged, ancient stones of the Ural Mountains, there lies a slope known to the indigenous Mansi people as Kholat Shachel. In the winter of 1959, this remote peak, shrouded in snow and silence, became the stage for one of the most perplexing tragedies in the history of mountaineering. It is a story that has transcended the boundaries of a mere accident report to become a modern myth. A narrative that intertwines the boundless ambition of Soviet youth with the indifferent, crushing power of nature. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, as it came to be known, refers to the deaths of 9 ski hikers, 7 men and 2 women, under circumstances that have baffled investigators, scientists, and the public for more than 6 decades. The core of the mystery lies in a terrifying contradiction. A group of highly experienced, physically robust, and intellectually capable young people, seemingly in high spirits, cut their way out of their own tent from the inside in the middle of the night. Abandoning their boots, coats, and survival equipment, they fled into the darkness of a sub-zero blizzard, descending a mile down a mountain slope toward a tree line where death awaited them. The subsequent discovery of their bodies, some frozen in dynamic poses of struggle, others buried deep in a ravine with catastrophic internal injuries comparable to a high-speed car crash, raise questions that standard forensic pathology struggled to answer. To understand the Dyatlov Pass incident is to do more than analyze a crime scene. It requires a deep immersion into the context of the era. It was the height of the Khrushchev thaw, a period of relative openness and optimism in the USSR following the oppressive years of Stalinism. University students like those in the Dyatlov group were the vanguard of this new generation, romantic, adventurous, and driven by a desire to explore the furthest corners of their vast motherland. They were not reckless amateurs, but elite athletes, certifying for the highest grade of hiking proficiency available at the time. Their journey was a meticulously planned athletic endeavor, a Category 3 hike intended to test the limits of human endurance against the elements. This report seeks to reconstruct the events of January and February 1959 with granular detail, utilizing the full spectrum of available evidence. The personal diaries of the hikers, which capture their final days of joy and toil, the grim clinical details of the autopsy protocols, the meteorological data of the time, and the cutting-edge scientific simulations published in 2021 that finally offered a plausible physical mechanism for the tragedy. By weaving together the human narrative with forensic science, we aim to dispel the fog of conspiracy that has settled over the pass and reveal the stark, tragic reality of what transpired on the slopes of the Dead Mountain. The psychological and physical composition of the group is the foundation upon which any analysis of their decision-making must be built. These were not random individuals thrown together by chance, but a tight-knit collective of peers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, UPI, bound by shared experiences, academic discipline, and the deep camaraderie of the trail. At the helm was 23-year-old Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov, a fifth-year student of the radio engineering faculty. Dyatlov was a figure of immense respect and authority within the UPI hiking section. Known for his serious demeanor, engineering prowess, and high ambitions, he was a natural leader who demanded excellence from himself and his team. He was not merely a participant in the sport of tourism, he was an innovator. The stove used by the group to heat their tent, a critical piece of survival gear in the Siberian winter, was designed and built by Dyatlov himself. His contemporaries described him as stubborn and strong-willed, traits that would drive the group toward their difficult goal, but perhaps also influenced the critical decisions made in the final hours. Dyatlov's leadership style was one of consensus but final authority. He was the navigator, the strategist, and the one who bore the ultimate responsibility for the group's safety. Zenaida Zina Alexeyevna Kolmogorova, 22, was a fourth-year radio engineering student and widely regarded as the soul of the expedition. Vivacious, outgoing, and universally liked, Zina acted as the social glue that held the team together during the grueling days of travel. Her diary entries are rich with observations about the people they met and the beauty of the landscape, reflecting a deep empathy and curiosity. She was also a formidable athlete in her own right, having led her own expeditions previously. Her resilience was legendary among her peers. She was the kind of hiker who would carry a heavier load to spare a struggling comrade. Her relationship with the group was complex. She had a past romantic history with Yuri Doroshenko, another member of the team, but they had matured into a comfortable platonic friendship, a testament to the emotional maturity of the group. The youngest member at 20, Lyudmila Luda Alexandrovna Dubinina, was a third-year student of engineering and economics. Serving as the group's treasurer, she was responsible for the expedition's funds and logistics. Her diary reveals a serious, somewhat rigid personality, deeply committed to her communist ideals and not afraid to voice her opinions on the moral conduct of the boys. Yet beneath this stern exterior lay a young woman capable of profound aesthetic appreciation, moved to tears by music and the grandeur of the taiga. Her physical toughness was undeniable. In a previous expedition, she had been accidentally shot in the leg by a hunter, but continued the trek without complaint, a story that was part of the UPI folklore. The male contingent of the group consisted of a mix of students and recent graduates, each bringing specialized skills to the team. First, there was Rustam Slobodin, a 23-year-old graduate engineer. Known as Rustic, he was the group's musician, often filling the long train rides and cold nights with the sound of his mandolin. Athletic and quiet, he was a steady presence, known for his endurance. Also 23 was Yuri Krivonishenko, a close friend of Dyatlov and a graduate employed at the secret nuclear facility Chelyabinsk 40. Krivonishenko was the jester of the group, famous for his pranks and humor, yet he possessed the disciplined mind of a nuclear engineer. His connection to the secret city would later fuel rampant speculation about espionage and radiation. The youngest of the men was 21-year-old Yuri Doroshenko, a robust power economics student. Doroshenko was the muscle of the group, strong, dependable, and capable of heavy physical labor. His history with Sina was a known factor, but it did not appear to cause friction. Rather, it added a layer of shared history to the team dynamic. Then there was Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. This 23-year-old civil engineer was the son of a repressed French communist. With a sharp wit and a practical mind, he was known for his energy and his ability to fix equipment on the fly. Alexander Kolovatov, a 24-year-old nuclear physics student who had transferred from Moscow, was older and more reserved. His previous work at a secret institute in Moscow added to the aura of mystery surrounding the group, though his role on the trek was that of a diligent and reliable team member. The most enigmatic member was Semyon Zolotaryov, a 37-year-old sports instructor and World War II veteran. Unlike the others who were students or recent alumni, Zolotaryov was an outsider who joined the group at the last minute to gain the performance credits needed for a promotion. His age, combat experience, and tattoos, including the cryptic letters DAERMMUAZUAYA, set him apart. While initially viewed with some skepticism by the tight-knit student group, He quickly won them over with his repertoire of forbidden camp songs and his easygoing nature. Finally, there was Yuri Yudin, a 21-year-old student of engineering and economics. Plagued by chronic health issues, including rheumatism and a heart defect, Yudin's participation was always precarious. He would become the sole survivor of the expedition, the man whose early departure spared him from the horror on the mountain, leaving him to spend the rest of his life haunted by the question, if I had stayed, would I have died with them, or could I have saved them? The expedition began not on the mountain, but amidst the bustle of civilization. The group departed Sverdlovsk on January 23, 1959, boarding a train that would take them north into the industrial heartland of the Urals. The atmosphere in the carriage was electric with anticipation. The diaries describe the train journey as a chaotic, joyous affair. The students, crammed into the carriage with their massive rucksacks and skis, sang songs to the accompaniment of Slobodan's mandolin. They were young, free, and embarking on a great adventure. Zina Kolmogorova wrote of the boys swearing a solemn oath not to smoke for the duration of the trip, a testament to their athletic discipline. Upon arriving in the town of Serov on January 24, the group encountered a minor hiccup that would later seem trivial in hindsight. Yuri Krivonishenko, in a burst of exuberance, began singing loudly at the train station, prompting local police to detain him briefly for disturbing the peace. The incident was resolved quickly, becoming a source of amusement for the group. They spent the day in a local school where they were treated as minor celebrities. They gave presentations to wide-eyed school children about the joys of tourism, explaining their equipment and showing off their maps. Zolotaryov, with his teacher's charisma, captivated the children with tales of the outdoors. It was a poignant moment of connection between the hikers and the community they were leaving behind. From Serov, they traveled to Ivdel, and then, via a crowded bus, to Vijay, the northernmost permanent settlement in the region. The bus ride was a test of endurance in itself, with 20 people and their gear packed into a vehicle designed for half that number. Yet the mood remained buoyant. They sang the symphony in gold and discussed everything from the merits of happiness to the complexities of love. In Vijay, they watched a movie, likely the Austrian film Symphony in Gold, which left a deep impression on them. Luda Dubinina wrote in her diary about the sheer happiness she felt watching the film, a moment of pure aesthetic pleasure before the rigors of the trail began. It was here, at the edge of the wild, that they ate their last meals in a canteen and slept in beds for the final time. On January 26th, the group hitched a ride on the open bed of a Gaz 63 truck to the 41st Quarter, a logging settlement deep in the forest. The ride was freezing, but the students huddled together under a tarp, singing and joking to keep warm. At the settlement, they were welcomed by the loggers and geologists living there. They met a man named Ognev, a red-bearded geologist who shared his knowledge of the local terrain. It was here that Yuri Yudin's health began to fail him. His sciatica flared up, causing severe pain in his leg. He realized he could not continue on a Category 3 hike. The decision to turn back was made on January 27, as the group prepared to ski to the abandoned geological site of Second Northern. The group hired a horse-drawn sleigh to carry their packs for the trek from the 41st Quarter to the Second Northern Settlement, a cluster of abandoned huts that had once housed geologists. The walk was easy without the heavy packs, but for Yudin, it was the end of the line. On the morning of January 28th, amidst the dilapidated ruins of the settlement, the group said their goodbyes. The scene is easy to visualize. The 9 hikers, clad in their thick sweaters and windbreakers, checking their bindings and adjusting their packs. While Yudin stood by, leaning on his poles, likely fighting back tears of frustration. Dubinina noted in her diary that it was a pity Yudin had to leave, especially for her and Zina, implying a close bond. Yudin collected some geological samples, pyrite, to take back to the university, a small consolation prize for his aborted trip. He watched as his friends skied away into the dense taiga, vanishing into the white silence. He would never see them again. Now a team of 9, the group pushed north along the frozen Lozva River and then turned west up the Auspia River. The snow was deep, up to 120 centimeters in places, forcing them to take turns breaking the trail. This was exhausting work. The lead skier would struggle through the powder for a few minutes, then step aside to let the others pass, falling to the back of the line to recover. They were following a Mansi trail, a path used by the indigenous reindeer herders. The diaries are filled with fascination for the Mansi culture. They observed chums, conical bark tents, and cryptic markings carved into trees, signs intended to communicate information about hunting and travel conditions to other Mansi. Zina Kolmogorova meticulously recorded Mansi words in her diary: Ya, river; Nul, meat; Sali, deer. The weather began to turn. Temperatures dropped to minus 26 degrees Celsius. The wind picked up, howling through the pines. On January 30th, the group struggled with nailed, slushy ice beneath the snow on the river's surface, which soaked their skis and froze, hampering their progress. They were forced to camp on the riverbank, drying their gear by the stove. The mood remained focused but cheerful. They celebrated birthdays, incorrectly noting Kolovatovs, and joked about the Yeti in a satirical newspaper they produced, titled Evening Otorten. By January 31st, the group had reached the upper reaches of the Auspia River. They were at the edge of the tree line, where the forest gives way to the barren, windswept highlands. To lighten their loads for the final push toward Mount Otterton, they built a labaz, a cache. They constructed a platform high off the ground to protect it from animals, and left behind surplus food, sugar, condensed milk, canned meat, and equipment, spare ski boots, a mandolin, to be retrieved on their return journey. This action marked a point of no return. They were now committed to the high-altitude traverse. They would carry only what was essential for the ascent. The diary entry from this day notes the wind speed was like the takeoff of an airplane, a harbinger of the conditions they were about to face. On the morning of February 1st, the group started late. They left the shelter of the Auspia Valley and began to climb the slope of Kholat Shakal, Mountain 1079. Their goal was likely to cross the pass and camp on the western side, closer to Otterton. However, as they ascended, they were met with blinding snow and fierce winds. In the low visibility, they deviated westward, finding themselves high on the exposed eastern slope of Kholat Shakal rather than in the pass itself. Realizing their error, Dyatlov made a controversial decision. Rather than descend 1.5 kilometers back into the safety of the forest, a loss of altitude and time, he ordered the group to set up camp right there on the open slope. Yudin later speculated that Dyatlov probably wanted to practice a cold camp on a mountain slope, or perhaps he was simply stubborn and unwilling to retreat. Photographs taken that afternoon showed the group digging into the snowpack. They utilized a technique known as cut and fill, carving a flat platform into the side of the mountain to create a level surface for the tent. This required cutting into the snow slab, creating a vertical wall of snow on the uphill side of the tent. They pitched a large double-sewn tent, oriented with its entrance facing south. They laid out their skis on the floor for insulation, spread their blankets, and unpacked their stove. It was a tight squeeze for 9 people, but it was warm. They ate a cold dinner of crackers and ham. The stove was not assembled that night, likely due to fatigue or the difficulty of setting up the flue in the high wind. As the hikers slept, the weather outside deteriorated further. A cold front was moving in. The wind screaming across the Ural Divide was not just moving air, it was moving snow. Katabatic winds, heavy, cold air draining down the mountain, were scouring the upper slopes and depositing wind-transported snow onto the leeward side, where the tent was pitched. Hour by hour, snow piled up on the slope above the tent. The cut the hikers had made to level the tent site had compromised the integrity of the snow slab. The additional weight of the wind-blown snow was slowly increasing the stress on the weak layer of depth hoar beneath the slab. Sometime during the night, the critical threshold was reached. It was likely not a thundering, mountain-shaking avalanche, but something more subtle and terrifyingly immediate. A block of snow hardened into a slab by the wind, fractured above the tent. Gravity took over. The slab, perhaps only a few meters wide but weighing tons, slid a short distance, just enough to slam into the side of the tent. Inside, the impact would have been sudden and crushing. Zolotaryov and Dubinina, sleeping on the side nearest the slope, took the brunt of the force. The rigid snow pressed the canvas against them with the weight of a car. Ribs snapped. The tent structure collapsed, burying them in darkness and suffocating canvas. Panic, but a disciplined panic, ensued. The entrance was likely blocked or too slow to access in the chaos. Someone, Dyatlov or Zolotaryov, grabbed a knife. In the pitch black, amidst the screams of their injured comrades, they slashed the canvas. Forensic analysis proves the cuts were made from the inside. They burst out of the tent into the raging blizzard. The temperature was between minus 25 degrees Celsius and minus 30 degrees Celsius, with a wind chill making it feel far colder. They were dressed only in their sleeping clothes, long underwear, shirts, socks. Some had one Valinok, felt boot. Others were barefoot. In the confusion and fear of a second larger avalanche, they did not stop to dig out their boots, jackets, or skis. They grabbed the injured. Dubinina and Zolotaryov were likely supported by the others and began to descend. They moved down the slope, away from the avalanche danger, toward the sanctuary of the tall cedar tree visible at the forest edge, 1.5 kilometers away. The footprints found later showed they walked in a group, holding hands or supporting one another. They were leaving their survival gear behind, betting their lives on reaching the fire and shelter of the woods. Back in Sverdlovsk, the calendar turned to February 12th, the date Dyatlov had estimated they would send a telegram from Vijay. It passed with no word. Initially, this caused no alarm. Delays in the wilderness were common. But as days turned to weeks, families began to panic. On February 20th, the Institute dispatched the first rescue groups, composed of volunteer students and teachers. Soon, the military and police joined the search. Planes and helicopters scoured the endless white taiga. On February 26th, a student searcher named Mikhail Sherevin spotted a small dark patch on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. It was the tent. It was half collapsed and covered in snow. Inside, the scene was eerie in its normalcy. Boots were lined up by the wall. Food was sliced on a board, as if waiting for a meal that never came. A flask of vodka was untouched, but the side was slashed open, and the hikers were gone. Following the trail of sock-clad footprints down the mountain, the searchers reached a large Siberian cedar at the forest edge. Underneath it, they found the remains of a small fire. Next to it lay the frozen bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonashenko. They were stripped to their underwear, Their hands were burned. The branches of the cedar were broken up to a height of 5 meters, suggesting one of them had climbed the tree desperately, perhaps to look for the tent or to break off dry branches for the fire. Krivonischenko had a piece of his own knuckle flesh in his mouth, a gruesome detail that speaks to the agony of freezing or a desperate attempt to stifle a scream. In the snow between the cedar and the tent, searchers found 3 more bodies: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They were spaced out, lying with their heads toward the tent. It appeared that after the fire was started at the cedar, these 3 had made a heroic, fatal decision. Realizing the fire was not enough to save them without clothes, they had turned back into the blizzard, attempting to crawl up the exposed slope to retrieve the gear from the tent. They died fighting the wind. Dyatlov was found clutching a birch branch. Zina was found further up, her body frozen in a posture of movement. Slobodin was found with a minor skull fracture, likely from a fall on the ice, but he had succumbed to hypothermia. The remaining 4 hikers, Dubinina, Zolotaryov, Kolovatov, and Thibaut Brignol, were missing for months. It was not until the spring thaw in May that their bodies were discovered buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine about 75 meters from the cedar tree. The discovery changed the nature of the investigation. Unlike the first 5, who died of hypothermia, these 4 had sustained horrific injuries. The forensic analysis revealed a disturbing picture. Lyudmila Dubinina had suffered severe internal trauma, including multiple rib fractures and a hemorrhage in her heart. She was found kneeling against a rock, missing her tongue and eyes. Semyon Zolotaryov showed similar signs of internal devastation, with severe chest fractures and an open wound on his skull. He was discovered wearing Dubinina's coat, and like her, his eyes were missing. Nikolai Thibaut Brignol had sustained a massive depressed skull fracture that likely rendered him instantly unconscious. Finally, Alexander Kolovatov, whose death was primarily attributed to hypothermia, was found with a broken nose and neck deformation, embracing Zolotaryov in a final, desperate attempt to share body heat. The autopsy of Dubinina and Zolotaryov revealed rib fractures so severe they were comparable to the impact of a car crash. Yet crucially, there were no external bruises or cuts on the skin corresponding to these breaks. This internal wreckage is a hallmark of high-pressure compression, such as being crushed by a heavy weight like a snow slab, rather than a blow from a weapon or a fall. The missing soft tissues, Dubinina's tongue and eyes, fueled the wildest theories. However, the forensic context provides a grim but natural explanation. Their bodies had been lying in a running creek under the snow for 3 months. Decomposition and scavenging by small aquatic animals naturally target the softest tissues first. Over the years, dozens of theories have been proposed to explain the tragedy, ranging from the plausible to the paranormal. Initial suspicion fell on the indigenous Mansi people. However, the tent was cut from the inside. Valuable items were left untouched, and there were no footprints other than the hikers. The Mansi bore no ill will toward the students and even aided in the search. Others looked to the skies, proposing theories involving parachute mines, rocket tests, or a controlled delivery of radioactive material by KGB agents. While rocket launches did occur in the region, there is no physical evidence of an explosion at the site, and the radiation found on their clothes is better explained by Krivonischenko's work in nuclear facilities. Even the wind itself was blamed. A theory suggested that the topography created low-frequency infrasound waves, causing irrational panic. While scientifically fascinating, panic alone does not explain the physical crushing injuries found in the ravine. For decades, the avalanche theory was also rejected because the slope was considered too shallow, and there was no massive debris field. However, in 2021, Swiss researchers provided the missing piece of the puzzle using advanced computer modeling. They demonstrated that a specific type of danger, a slab avalanche, could occur under the precise conditions of that night. It began with the group's cut into the snow to level the tent, which severed the cohesion of the snow slab. The disaster didn't happen immediately. Strong katabatic winds deposited snow onto the slab above the tent for hours, slowly adding weight. Eventually, a crack propagated through the weak layer beneath the slab. A block of hardened snow, arguably no larger than an SUV but weighing tons, released and slid just a few meters. This hard block slammed into the tent, crushing Zolotaryov and Dubinina instantly, causing their compression fractures. It stopped after hitting the tent, leaving no massive debris field to be found weeks later. This theory explains the internal injuries, the desperate cut out of the tent to escape burial, and the flight down the slope in fear of a second wave. Ultimately, the Dyatlov Pass Incident was not a ghost story, nor a conspiracy of state secrets. It was a tragedy born of a subtle, deadly trap set by physics and geography. The group, skilled and brave, made a decision to camp on a slope that, under rare and specific wind conditions, became unstable. The reconstruction reveals not a chaotic flight of madmen, but a desperate, heroic struggle for survival. After the avalanche crushed their tent and injured their friends, the uninjured members did not abandon them. They cut them out. They carried them down the mountain in the freezing darkness. They gave up their own clothes to warm the wounded. They fought until the very last beat of their hearts against the crushing cold of the Urals. In the end, the compelling natural force incited by the Soviet investigators was exactly that: the indifferent, overwhelming power of the snow and the wind. Today, a memorial stands on the pass, listing the names of the 9. It serves as a reminder that in the wild, the line between adventure and tragedy is as thin as a layer of snow. Thank you for joining me in this story. If you found peace in the silence of the mountains, consider staying with us for the next journey. Sleep well.